All right. Greetings, everybody. 5-step habit of a highly effective Vidyarthi or students. This is a free advanced class on how to actually master astrology by learning yogas. Are you ready? Very important. So there's a 5-step habit that you need to get. First of all, just a second. First of all, translate and read the yoga clearly. If you want to be an effective student, you require a textbook. If you want to be a good student, you need to read your book, your school book. Students who do not bring their school books to school and students do not bring their school books home for homework do not get good grades. Do they? They don't. Yet, there are a large number of people sometimes parading actually, who make no reference to any textbook whatsoever. So that's not a good idea. If you want to be a highly effective astrology student, you need your textbook and you need to read it clearly. That's step number 1. Step number 2, you have to parse the yoga that you're reading from the textbook for its components so that it's not just a big blob of words, but that you actually understand what are the components in here. And by understanding the components, the logic of the statement should become clear, which is really important to becoming advanced or becoming proficient in astrology. Third step of the highly effective Vidyarthi is to map out an example of the thing you're learning. So if you're learning a yoga, you parse it into its components and then you make a map. What does this really look like on a chart? Okay? Then step 4, you quantify the components. This is the most important thing. After you have your textbook, then you have become a student who can stay in school, right? You have a textbook. At least you follow a curriculum. But the most important thing to graduating from first grade to junior high is to be able to quantify the components. In other words, if you think that when you learn a yoga that has 4 parts to it, that if you meet all the 4 parts, you get the effect, and if you meet 3 of the 4 parts, you don't get the effect. If you think that, then you missed the whole lesson. You missed everything that the teacher is trying to teach by explaining the yoga in the first place. So step 4 is super important, to quantify the yoga and think of it in terms of a percentage of the components that have been met. And then the final step, do it. The final step, use it. Evaluate charts with it. And that will cause you to go back and look at number 1 again and redo the cycle. Did I really understand this right? It's not working. Other parts from number 1 that are missing that I noticed while I put it into practice, etc. So after you do 5 a bit, then you can go back and do 1 and then go redo the cycle again. These are the 5 steps, my friends, for actually being able to read a yoga in a textbook and actually get something from it. And not just to get something from it, like one little thing. That if all of a sudden one of your friends has this weird, obscure thing, then you could say, "Ha! You must have lost your car keys in a box of sewing needles." That's not really that great. What you want to get from the yogas is the ability to read everybody's chart all the time and be pretty damn accurate. Maybe not you lost your car keys in a box of needles kind of accurate, but pretty damn accurate. You are on the page. And this is how you do it. Okay? So now, let's use our current position in Phaladipika, which is 10th chapter, text 9. Take that yoga and we'll put it through these 5 steps. Together. So this is the Phaladeepika chapter 10, text 9. Lagnat kalatra bhavane samarashi sangye bhavadipepi chatataiva kate suredye surabhitapta vrahite sutadaranate viryanvite tu jananam sasutam kalatram. What does it mean? What you would read? A fertile wife producing children is indicated. So that's the effect. A fertile wife producing children is indicated if the ascendant, and thus the 7th house, are female signs. And Venus and their lords are in the same situation. And the lords of children and beloved, 5 and 7, are strong and not outshined by the sun. So when you get a yoga, it is compact. The wording of it is compact and therefore a bit opaque, difficult to penetrate, difficult to understand. So take a second to parse it, translate it, understand it clearly, read it clearly. A student reading a textbook doesn't read it like the Sunday comics. A student reading a textbook reads it slowly, asks questions about it, thinks about what it means. So think about this. Fertile wife producing children, jananam sasutam kalatram. That's the effect. That means the marriage will be productive. It will be fruitful. The marriage will be fruitful. Kids will be born. Things will be prosperous. People will be happy. The objectives of a marriage will be obtained. That's the effect indicated, Sangye, if the ascendant, and thus the 7th house, lagnat kalatra bhavane. That's worded in such a way that it's slightly ambiguous. Lagnat means from the ascendant, kalatra bhavana means the house of marriage. So the 7th house from the ascendant, but the reason why he says it that way is because he wants them to be samarashi, even signs, female signs. So, for example, if the ascendant is 2, then the 7th will be 8. They're both even signs, Taurus and Scorpio, 2 and 8. So the reason why he words it lagnat kalatra bhavane could be because of that. Because if the lagna is a female sign, then you know the 7th is a female sign. The other thing is he might be saying, don't do this from the moon or from other positions. And Venus and their lords are in the same situation. So Venus is Suredye and their lords is Bhavadipe, and similar situations, Tataivagate. Same situation. That means what? What does that mean? Well, if the ascendant and the 7th house are female signs, and Venus and the lords are in the same situation, that means if the Venus is in a female sign, and if the lord of the 7th is in a female sign, and maybe probably if the lord of the 1st is in a female sign. So this is how you read a statement. You don't just gloss over it really fast. You'll get a productive, and then the logic starts to become obvious. Oh, we're going to get a marriage with babies if there's a lot of femininity in this chart relating to marriage. If the 7th house is female, if Venus is in a female sign, if the 7th lord is in a female sign, if the 1st lord is in a female sign. I get it. Females make babies. So if the 7th house is female and the 7th lord is in a female sign, then it makes babies. Then the marriage makes babies. So once it starts to make sense to you, then it's not so difficult to memorize things. People always want to know, how do you memorize these things in another language, in Sanskrit, etc.? Because you're not just memorizing sounds that have no meanings, you understand the words. Thank you, Tiari. And then there's a couple of more considerations. And the lords of children and beloved, that's Sutta Dharanata, That's house 5 and 7. If they are strong, Viryanvita, and they are not outshined by the sun, Surya Bitapta Rahite, if they're not combust. So there you get your clear understanding of the textbook. And now take it to step 2. Put it into a format that's easier for you to use. The format that you got it in the book was easiest to print in a book. But now, as the student, what you want to do is get it out of the book into your notebook, your personal notebook, which is personally in a format that's personally usable by you most easily. In the book, they want the thing to be memorizable by the students, so they write it out as a poem, which doesn't work when you don't do the native language. But when you're in the native language, this stuff is very useful. Lagnat kalatra bhavane samarashi sange bhavadipe chatataiva gate suredye suryad bitaparahite sutadaranate viryan vate tu jananam sasutam kalatram. It's in a meter, it's in a prose, all the words fit together, it's easy to remember. That's useful for a book, but it's not so useful for you to use it. So now parse it. Get out the details and put it in a format that works for you. So I would parse it like this. The first thing in this yoga is that we want a female rising sign. Lagnat Samarashi. The second thing is we want to, and we don't have to say separately that we want a female 7th house, because if you have a female rising sign, you automatically have a female 7th house. Don't ask about the Saptamsha chart. The Saptamsha chart is just a chart. Whatever you look for in the main chart, you'll look for in any other chart, but just learn how to do stuff in the main chart. Forget about the other charts. Look at the main chart. Learn your business in the main chart. Later, after you know your business in the main chart, then it's very easy to learn how to do it in the subcharts. But before you know your business, when you keep asking about subcharts, all you're going to get is diverted and confused. So parse number 1 is it's a female rising sign. Parse number 2 is we want a female sign for 3 things. A female sign for the first lord, maybe kind of, I'm not sure how it's worded. Definitely a female sign for the 7th lord, definitely a female sign for Venus. So it's parsing easier now. It's easier to look at and remember. The 7th lord should not be combust or weak, and the 4th thing is that the 5th lord should not be combust or weak. So this is what I mean when I say parse the information. You just get it out of that verbally opaque format into something that's very verbally or even symbolically transparent to you, whatever format. And it's easy to kind of enumerate what the different conditions are. Step 3, take the thing that you just parsed and map it out into a real chart. This lets you really see it and understand it. So the first thing that we parsed out of this yoga is that we want a female rising sign if we expect the person to be fruitful and have babies, whether themselves or through marriage. All right? So let's give ourselves an example of a female rising sign. I just happen to pick Taurus because it's female. The second thing we wanted is female signs for the first lord, we think. So let's put the first lord in a female sign. Okay, there we go. We put Venus in Taurus. That's what it looks like. Now, we're not just getting a picture of this as words, but we're getting a picture of it as a chart. If you don't use this chart style, then use whatever chart style you use, so that it's starting to translate into the way that things look when you look at charts. We also want a female sign for the 7th lord, so let's go ahead and do that. Boom, just put the 7th lord in the 7th house. That's one way to get the 7th lord in a female sign if the 7th house is female. Third thing we wanted was Venus in a female sign. So, okay, let's just pick one female sign. Well, it's already there. It's already, because Venus was the first lord. So here we see we've met the first 4 conditions just with 2 planets. So now it starts to look less like some obscure thing and more like something doable or seeable or encounterable in a chart. Third thing is, the seventh lord should not be combust. Okay, that means we want to know where the sun is in relation to the seventh lord. So we don't want it to be too close to Mars, which is the seventh lord in this example. So put it sun in Leo or anywhere. Just make an example of where it could be. The seventh lord should not be weak. Do we have to move it? No, we don't. It's already happening. It's in its own sign. It's strong in its own sign. There's no real serious cause to consider this particular seventh lord to be weak. In fact, it looks strong because it's domicile. So I think we're good with that in this example. And we want to do the same thing for the fifth lord. We want to make sure it's not combust. So where are we going to put the fifth lord? We have to put the fifth lord somewhere where it's not combust. So hey, let's put it in the fifth house. Why not be generous? Make it exalted. And then it's certainly not weak, right? We also don't want the fifth lord to be weak. Why not? Because fifth lord makes babies. Seventh house makes marriage. Fifth lord makes babies. Logic. So this is what I mean by step 3. Step 1 is you have a textbook. If you don't have a textbook, you can't call yourself a student. What are you studying? You're an entrepreneur of knowledge, but you're not a student. So if you have a textbook, then read it carefully. How carefully? Make notes of it. Parse it out to its component parts. That's step 2. And then take that parse list of the component parts and map it out to a chart. Would this apply more towards the female wife chart? No, it's actually more towards the male chart, but the basic thing is there. Whether you want your wife to be productive or whether you as a wife want to be productive. So now let's see what was step 4. Remember I said step 4 is really, really important. Step 4 is the step that separates the middle schoolers from the elementary school students. It's the ability to quantify a yoga and realize that it's not just on or off, yes or no. So how would you do that? Oh, wait, we don't want to do that yet. Actually, this is actually a good idea. Map it out more than once, because there's more than one way to achieve a yoga. So map it again. Give another example of a female rising sign, for example. Okay, so Cancer. Now, again, put the female sign for the first lord. Okay, put it in Taurus. You have tried to put it someplace else than you put it in the first example. The seventh lord in the female sign. Again, try to put it someplace else. So now the seventh lord is Saturn, so we could put it in Virgo. Why not? There's 6 female signs we could put it in, and I just picked one. Just to see what it might look like. Venus, take Venus. It's supposed to be in a female sign. Put it somewhere in a female sign. Hey, put it in Pisces, 9th house. Sounds good. Seventh lord, not combust, so we need to put the sun someplace where it's not going to interfere with the seventh lord. Seventh lord is Saturn. Put the sun way over here in Aquarius. Get it away from Saturn, the seventh lord. And we want the seventh lord also to be not weak. Just nothing really about this Saturn that makes it look weak. It's malefic in the 3rd house. That makes it strong. It's in a friend sign. That makes it strong. Seems to be okay. It's bright. It's across from the sun. It's probably getting a really nice aspect from its friend Venus. It doesn't seem to be weak. It seems to be strong. And then do the same thing for the 5th lord. So we need to take Mars, the 5th lord, and put him somewhere in the map where he's not going to be combust. Sure, put him in the 10th house, far enough away from the sun. And then he's not going to be weak either. He's in his own sign. He's happy. He's high up in the sky. Okay? So now we mapped it twice. You could map it 15 times. Map it out as many times as you want till you feel like I know what this yoga is. Once you feel like you know what the yoga is, go on to step 4, which is to quantify the components. Sweta, you have to rewatch. It's very important. So I'm going to show you the uber simple method of quantification. And what I would like you to do is use the uber simple method until it seems so simple that you can do it in your sleep, which shouldn't take very long, and then graduate to a less simple quantification method. Because that will make the difference then between junior high and high school kind of evaluations of a chart, depending on whether you use a dumbed-down quantification version or a very robust quantification method. I will show you the simplest one. Here it is. X equals B over A. X equals B over A, where X is the amount of the yoga's effect. A is the number of conditions in your parse list, and B is the number of those conditions that you found. Of course, you should do it for all charts. Okay? I don't know what you mean by all charts. So this is a really simple way to quantify a yoga. You will get the but you have to start to think the amount of a yoga's effect. So let me give you an example of a different yoga. Let's say Jupiter, debilitated in the first house, aspected by Venus, makes a person fat. Let's say that's a yoga. We should start to think in terms of quantity. And you already do, but you just may not realize it. Like even when you're not an astrologer and you're getting a reading and somebody says you have a fat yoga, then your question is, how fat? Somebody says you have a rich yoga, the question is naturally, how rich? A poor yoga, how poor? That's what quantification means. So how fat? Jupiter in debility in the first house aspected by Venus equals fat. But how fat? Well, the way that you figure out is how many conditions are in this yoga. Jupiter in first house, Jupiter debilitated, and Jupiter aspected by Venus. I see 3 conditions. I'm not saying this is the greatest yoga in the world. I'm just teaching you how to quantify something. So we can have fat, 1 fat, 2 fat, or 3 fat. Little fat, lot fat, or super fat. 1, 2, 3. Or not so fat, fat, and very fat. Whatever you want to do, just think in terms of the yoga's effect and figure out what it means to quantize it. So if you have a chart with Jupiter in the first house, not debilitated, not aspected by Venus, then that's 1 quantity of fat. That's not so fat. It's a little plump. If you have Jupiter in the first house aspected by Venus, that's 2. So that's kind of chubby. And if you have Jupiter debilitated in the first house, that's fat. You understand? So come back now to our actual yoga that we're studying right now, which is that we have a female chart. We have a female, the rising sign is female. So therefore, the 7th house is female. We have the 7th Lord and the 1st Lord in Venus in female signs. And we have the 5th and the 7th Lord strong and not combust. The effect will be the marriage is fruitful. Question, how fruitful? Answer, fruitful all the time in every way, if the yoga is perfectly matched. Or answer is a little bit fruitful sometimes, if the yoga is only a little bit matched. That really right there is the most important thing for everybody to start doing who wants to learn astrology. Especially if you want to learn it the way that the Indian astrologers left it behind to us to learn in the form of yogas. So what we need to figure out is just X equals B over A. X is the amount of the effect. A is the total possible number of conditions, and B is the top number, like Jupiter. Like the fat yoga is simple. A would be 3. There's 3 possible conditions. If only one is met, then it's 1 over 3, 1/3. 1/3 of the fatness. If 2 of the conditions are met, then it's 2 over 3, 2/3 fat. And if it's 3 over 3, then it's 3/3 fat. So what is our A? There's not a chart. There's any number of charts. But I will pop the charts back up for you in a sec. So let's get this yoga. Oh, okay. Let me show you. Let me just mention, this is just too simple. But you have to start somewhere. It's too simple. It's not entirely realistic or accurate, but it's better, way better than what most everybody's doing. But as soon as you are comfortable with this, think about better quantification methods. So the first thing that you should do is realize not every component of the yoga is equally impactful. Like in that example yoga of fatness, I think Jupiter being debilitated is probably the key. So what you would do to improve your quantification method is A would be more than just a simple count of the number of conditions in the yoga. You would weight the count. So you would give more weight to the things that are more important. So if Jupiter has to be in the first house debilitated and aspected by Venus, and we think that the most important part is Jupiter being debilitated, then count Jupiter being debilitated as 2 points. Then in the first house is 1 point, and then aspected by Venus is 1 point. So now you have a total number of 4 possible conditions, and if Jupiter is debilitated, that equals 2. So that's a very easy step to take to get your quantification to be more accurate. But I wouldn't advise you to go there right away until you're very comfortable with the simpler version of doing it. And then the final thing is, the actual way that it works in real life is if you have a little bit of something. The actual way that real life works is that 1 is infinitely more than 0. And 2 is twice as much as 1. But 3 is just a third more than 2. Or something like that. And 4 is just a quarter more than 3. So that's the way numbers really work in the real world. So that's what this mathematical thing called logarithmic curve is all about. So instead of just doing B over A, you do a logarithm with B and A. And for that, you'll have to look that up. But that's the most important way. Okay? So that would be a better method, but just try to get used to using the really simple method, just B over A. So let's go back to our yoga and figure out what A is. You figure out A from your parse list. So we said, okay, female rising sign, that's 1 condition. Female sign for the first lord, that's 2 conditions. Females, okay, and then this is the third thing, which Aishwarya kind of just brought up to me, or brought back into my mind. The other thing is, if you really want to make your quantification method really accurate, Jupiter is how debilitated? Because you have dignity through the Vargas. Or Jupiter is how much in the first house? Because the proximity of its conjunction to the ascendant determines how much it's in the first house. So then what you can do is you can do an A over B or a B over A for each one of the points. So it wouldn't just be Jupiter meets the condition of being in the first house, but how much does it meet the condition of being in the first house? It will get that much of that particular point. That's the answer to your question, Aishwarya. But I know that you guys are not used to thinking of numbers. You're used to crystal balls and bongs, or crystal balls and mysticism, and you're not used to thinking that math is magic. But math is part of magic. It's a super important part of magic. Guess what? Math is part of music. Math is an essential part of music. Music is math. Magic is math. And why do you think everybody sucks at magic? Because they don't know that. So I don't want to overly stress the full method of quantification because people, I think, would be scared away from it. So just go with the simple method of quantification. This is the same thing that I feel when I see most of your questions. What is it about? Is this usable in the Saptamsha chart? It's just, yes, but be simple now. Learn it simple first. So just quantify how many points are in your yoga. For example, female rising sign 1, female sign for 1st, 7th, and Venus. Now we got 4 different conditions. The 7th Lord not combust, the 7th Lord not weak, the 5th Lord not combust, the 5th Lord not weak, and no, mathematics is the 5th house and 3rd. So we got 8 points. So that's going to be our A in this today's lesson. It's going to be X equals B over 8. So now we can go to step 5. Now that we have a quantification thing defined, we can go look at charts and evaluate X equals B over A, where A is 8, right? So now we need to look for the number of conditions found in this chart. This is the same chart we looked at before when we mapped out the list. So this is a perfect match. The rising sign is female. The 7th Lord is in a female sign. The 1st Lord is in a female sign. Venus is in a female sign. The 7th Lord is not combust. The 7th Lord is strong. The 5th Lord is not combust. The 5th Lord is strong. It met all 8 conditions. So fruitful, prosperous marriage. How fruitful and prosperous? 8 out of 8. That's all you have to do. All 8 were matched, so your B equals 8, and so that's what your equation looks like. X equals 8 over 8. What's 8 over 8? That's 100%, friends. X equals 1, or 100%. What does that mean? That means this marriage is always prosperous in every way, all the time. Let's look at another one. Let's move something in this. Here, let's evaluate again. How many conditions? What we did was we moved the 7th Lord out of Virgo and into Libra. So Libra is very nice for this 7th Lord, but it's not a female sign. So we lost one of the conditions. Instead of having 8 out of 8, we got 7 out of 8 conditions met. So X equals 7 out of 8. You don't even have to do any more math if you're just familiar with the number 7 out of 7/8. You kind of know if you cook ever what's 7/8. I'm sure you measure things when you cook 7/8. If you ever looked at a ruler or if you built anything, I'm sure you know what 7/8 of an inch is. 7/8 is a number. It says in and of itself, but if you want, you can convert it to a percentage. And that would be about 88%. So what does that mean? That means this chart, the marriage is also fruitful and prosperous about 88% of the time. It doesn't mean that in 12% of the time the marriage sucks. But in 12% of the time the marriage may fail to be completely prosperous and fruitful and productive. Children may not be born 12% of the time. So let's do it again with this one. In this one, how many conditions were found? Let's do it slow. First, the rising sign is female, so that's 1. We found 1 condition. Second one, we want the 7th Lord to be in a female sign. No, we didn't find that. 7th Lord is Saturn. It's in a male sign. We want the 1st Lord to be in a female sign. Yes, Moon is in Taurus. We want Venus to be in a female sign. No, it's in Aquarius. Then we want the 7th Lord to be strong. Did we get that? We did. It's exalted and it's in a Kendra. It's strong. So we got that one. We got 3. We want the seventh lord not to be combust. Sure, it's not combust. We want the fifth lord to be strong. Where is it? The fifth lord is Mars. It's in Aries. It's super strong. It's in the 10th house in its own sign. So we got 5. And we don't want it to be combust. We got that too. So we got 6. 6 out of 8 conditions. We missed the seventh lord and we missed Venus being in a male sign. So 6/8, that's 75%. 3 out of 4 times. 6 out of 8 times. This is productive. This marriage is great. Those other times that are misses are not negative. They're just not positive. Okay? And like I said, you guys think this ratio thing is great. This is actually not great, but this is first grade. This is really not that accurate, but it's a lot more accurate than what we're used to seeing. But if you go back a couple of slides to how I suggested you can improve the quantification method, then that would really be accurate. So once you get to step 5 and you start evaluating charts, you'll start to notice little weird quirks about things. And you'll start to have other questions where you'll start to want to improve things. For example, at the end of the last slide, Venus was in the 8th house, which I guess is kind of okay for Venus. Venus tolerates the 8th house really well, but perhaps combust, but no mention of that was made in the yoga. So once you're doing the 5th step where you're actually evaluating the charts and looking at the actual outcomes of people, you might start to find ways that you could improve. Number 1, you could go back to step 1 and improve it. Where it may have been that you didn't read it correctly, or you may realize that I'm just reading one yoga. There's 453 yogas that this teacher taught me. I'm supposed to put them all together, not just one in isolation, right? So you'll start to notice, well, this particular principle was left out, but it's also a part of this particular consideration. In the consideration, that's why he made a whole chapter on Kalatra Bhava. Phaladipika has a whole chapter on yogas that affect Kalatra, the prosperity of marriage. So you can't just pick one and only evaluate it. You have to make a meta yoga of all the yogas. So that's what you can try to do. So for example, this yoga wouldn't mind this. It just, the only thing that this yoga cares about is that Venus is in a male sign. It doesn't care about that it's weak. It's in an enemy sign. It doesn't care about Venus being combust, but it should. Why do we know that it should? Because in other yogas, we hear that if Venus is combust or in an enemy sign, it's not good for the marriage. You probably should consider these things, and you're smart and you're a good student now because you're actually reading things carefully and quantifying them and picking them out. And so now you can do what your teacher really wanted you to do, was to assimilate everything into one gestalt approach, which is the meta yoga, where you combine all the yoga principles that are related to a particular issue that you're interpreting. You could put Venus, for example, you could put Venus and the Sun in Aries, and then Venus could be hemmed by malefics. Well, you heard elsewhere that Venus being hemmed by malefics isn't a great thing for fertility and marriage, etc. You heard that Venus being in fire signs is not particularly great for fertility. So you pull all the things together that you've heard everywhere. After you're familiar with step 5, you can go back and you can make your step 1 bigger. You can pull more yogas into it. You can make meta yogas. And then also the really simplest way to improve the accuracy is graduate to full quantification as soon as you're comfortable with the basics. Very good. Thank you very much, Prakati. You like that? It's good stuff. Any questions? good. Let's keep it short because it doesn't have to be long and rambling to be good. In fact, it should be short. It should be to the point. So go back and rewatch this enough times that you can actually do it without the video playing, that you can do it. And then go do it. Like maybe rewatch some of the older ones with some of the older yogas and make a parse list of them. Parse it out, make a list of the components, and then look at some charts. See how well they match. What exact textbook? That's up to you. That's what school you enroll in, right? You decide what textbook you're going to read based, you'll be exposed to textbooks based on the curriculum adopted by a school. So if you like Vedic astrology, then you'll wind up with Sanskrit textbooks. And if you like Hellenistic astrology, you'll wind up with Greek and Persian textbooks. And if you like modern astrology, you'll wind up with like paperback books. So you make your decision about the textbooks. That's part of your job as a student, to decide what school is the best for you, what school is the best, period, or what school is the best for you. I particularly like this textbook, Phaladipika. Another one that I like is Brihajatika, or I would recommend Brihajatika. Thank you, Romas. Sure, I probably will translate that eventually. Spacebook, you have no idea. I have actually 3 books just sitting around in 2022 that didn't get published because I'm too spread out already. But 2023, hopefully they'll get published. Thank you, Zach. Okay, everybody. Best book to read about nakshatras and their mythology stories. Oh my goodness. How do you ask such a question? Sir, the answer is 27 stars, 27 gods. Undoubtedly. The best book ever written on the subject. Thank you.